Hello, welcome to the next instalment of Paint Along with Rob, blah blah blah. I have painted a sword scabbard on this guy and kind of leather straps holding it on. I hadn't quite decided on colours, and then suddenly I decided what I thought would look good just because it's a nice contrast to the blue. The leather kind of just still similar leathers, so many different browns on these guys, and this is a more orangey one on the straps holding it to the belt, which I still haven't quite concluded what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. So on my palette I have some colours, probably work out what some of them are for, but I've got a left to right reddish black from AK. I've got a deep red, which is this one, and then flat red, the very red one, and then when I painted the other one I used sunny skin tone, but I didn't like that in the end. I'm now going to use light earth because I also use it elsewhere later on, so that's going to be to create the highlights. Now the idea of what I did with this is, if we zoom in and have a look, is that I've kind of made it look a little bit battered and created some texture, because these are kind of big flat areas with not a lot going on. I did think about doing some freehand, but I thought in the end keep it simple. So yeah, I'm going to try and do it all with a number one brush. So yeah, initially I'm just going to use this deep red as a starting colour, as a base colour. This scabbard on the other. Oh yeah, of course I managed to break the sword off this guy, so that sword will remain broken until I finish the painting, and I'll attach it right at the end. But yes, the first thing I'm going to do is just make sure there's not too much dust on it. I'm not sure where that's come from. And just quite quickly this will act as kind of just like the whole, as nearly everything else on this will become glazes over top. Elements of this will kind of linger through, kind of show through. So this is, if anything, is the critical colour. It's got a kind of a slightly purpley tint to it as well. It's one of those colours as well that when it dries it's quite noticeably darker than before it dries. A bit of hay fever today. First sneezing. Well, sneezing when I was out with the dogs earlier. Right, now get some in the upper portion between the future or the leather straps holding it on. Now this is quite a good shape in in many ways, because you get a nice clear upper surface, lower surface and the side, so it's one of those that enables you to really think about highlights and shadows. So just a little. I might just do one last little layer across the whole front. So there we go. That's I still so now I am going to just take some of the darker tone, and that's going to feature just solely as slightly thinned. I'm just going to do that on the undersurface or the surface in shadow. Under that, like that. Now I'm going to take some of the flat red. Quite an intense red, and I'm just going to make a glaze of it, and I don't really want it to be that vibrant, and the darker deep red base colour will help in taking down some of that intensity. If I painted that over white, it would look very bright. So yeah, it's just a glaze that when wet looks shockingly red. Hopefully that should dry a little bit less red. And while that is drying, I'm going to take some of that flat earth. Is it flat earth? Light earth. And mix some of that in with my red, which creates a bit of a pinky tone. Might add just a dab of that deep red, not to make it darker, but just to reduce some of that pinkiness. But there is quite a pinkiness to it. But again, it's going to go on as a more of a glaze than anything else. And you can see that that red is, where it is drying, is still quite dark but rich. Now I'm going to take this pinkier tone, and it is quite pink. I'll apply that to the upper surface. It sounds like while I'm doing this, the neighbour is clearing weeds from the side alley. That is really quite pink, isn't it? Red is something that you don't always have to highlight, because you can go pink. That's actually that's maybe not so bad. That angle, it shows it worse. I'm going to just go back take some of my pure red, thin it down some more, and just glaze over top of that. Now to get that texturing, or actually what I'm going to do at this point, it's not quite dry yet, I'm going to take some of our darker colour, and with a good size 1 brush you can get a lovely ability to retain paint on the brush in the core part of the brush, and you can basically, with the right consistency of paint, do lovely little just going to do it here, can start just doing little lines across in with the darker colour, random scratches of a used and battered you see that? Dries pretty quickly, and you make little dots. It just makes that surface a little bit more interesting, and you can then go in and I'm going to see what that looks like. So I'm just mixing a bit of the earth tone with the dark deep red and the reddish black, and I can do a similar open quote scribble. A little bit heavy. And when that looks a little bit too much, a little glaze of the deep red again. To tone down some of that. But you can use your you can end up getting some interesting textures and shapes and stuff, and cuts and features that where this has become quite battered over years of use. Now I'm just going to take, here I've got my favourite brown black. Let's try that again. Here I've got my favourite brown black. I'm just going to mix some of that in, such a burst of colour in with my darkest shadow, the reddish black, to make a blackish, even blacker colour. And I'm just going to go and use that to go into the deeper shadows, separate it a little bit more from the horse itself. I don't even know what that is under there, this sculpting. And just kind of redefine some of these leathery straps holding the scabbard on. Might even use a little bit more pure brown black, because the next thing I'm going to do is paint those with the orange colour leather. So yes, now I'm going to take this orange brown and saddle brown here and here, and I'm just going to mix the two together to create quite a rich. That's definitely got quite a bit of yellow in it. This creates a nice leather or base leather colour. When you've got a raised feature like this strap, you can use, rather than using the tip of a brush, you can use kind of that edge, like I'm doing across my fingernail there, just to pick up on that raised surface. And you can do that on all of these straps that are slightly raised. Not always needing to apply the paint with the very tip of the brush. So that's a starting point. Now that is fundamentally really quite boring in many ways. So I end up using similar colours from my palette that have already been used elsewhere. So I'm going to use some of that light earth to create a highlight portion for this leather or the strapping. Now I'm going to do that mainly on surfaces that are up, taking light in that direction. Same principle. Which will also include quite a bit of bit that joins his belt. And I've still got the horrible seam knocking around. And I can add more to make it a little bit lighter in the very extremes. Painting, I think the smaller you go, the more crazy you can go with your contrasts. So from one extreme highlight to its shadows can be greater because you're drawing more attention to the shape and form in the small space. There is no hard and fast rule for that kind of thing, but it enables a very small miniature to have interesting things going on. What I'm going to do here as well is I'm just going to make the edges look like battered, or not look like, a bit more interesting by implying this is leather that's been around a bit and has got that crackled look. It's a way of doing things that on quite boring surfaces. And I'm just going to touch the edge with a lighter colour. I did this on last night, it worked a bit better. Let's see how you can see there's kind of little lines in there. Bear in mind that that's a thumb, so these are proper subtle things that are kind of, is it Pontil effect, where you're creating an illusion of a thing that when you look at it with a naked eye looks more believable, but zoomed in like that it's a bit terrifying. I'm also now going to take my brown black and maybe just a little bit of the saddle brown, and I'm going to do in the middle of these a similar kind of effect, little dashes and lines with thinned paint to look like maybe a little bit too much paint on there. Yeah, way too much paint on that brush. The idea is I'm going to try and keep that in the centre of those straps. And maybe used a little bit too much paint on that. Again, it gives it a little bit more interest. going to go and grab a little bit of the black red to line around the straps where they touch one another, to separate them out a little bit more, separate them again from the scabbard itself. Scabbard. And just for giggles, I'm just going to take some of the orange brown on its own, create a very thin glaze. And I'm just going to go over the whole of those straps, just to bring back that kind of orangey colour to it, just because I think it looks nicer against the deep red of a scabbard. There you go. Now I might go back and add some of that earth colour again, just to the very edges. But here I'm going to call it a day because we're on 27 minutes. So let's just pull in the other one. There you go. Look far more interesting now. Bit of flash of red compared to the blues and the browns. Yeah, it's all right. Still got that nomadic feel, still got the tribal feel. Nothing fancy. So there you go, two of them. Moving on. Thank you very much. Yeah. Cheers. Bye bye.